Hey guys, this is Uri Peleg with my first video for GTO Wizard. In this video I'm going to examine a very practical question. There is often a gap between ranges in the solver and ranges in reality. When you 3-bet a solver, you're going to get a mixed reaction. But in reality, a lot of players love their suited connectors and pocket pairs. So what changes in strategy? And how can you make GTO Wizard apply to real-life situations in general? Let's dive in. We'll start with UTG raising and button 3-betting. This is NL 500 rake, and you can see the button's 3-bet range is already mixed, but we're actually going to look at the calling range. And when you make everyone fold, this is the calling range that you would get at NL 500 rake for under the gun. And note that there are a few mixes here that might not make sense from a practical standpoint. So one is 7s, 6s, and 5s folding, and I think a lot of players would always call these. The second is 4s, 3s, and deuces not even always raising. That's why you see them always calling, but not represented very much. And similarly, when we look at suited connectors, 5, 6, and 6, 7, and 7, 8 didn't often raise, and 8, 9, and 10, 9 are folding, and Queen Jack is folding, Queen Jack suited, Queen 10 suited. And I think there's a rather wide swath of players who would first of all always raise these hands, and second of all never fold these hands to a re-raise. And that's going to create a different range situation. And by examining it, we're going to kind of understand a little bit of the reasoning for the folds, not all of it certainly, but also kind of what would be a practical adjustment. And I hope that by watching me do this, you guys will be able to do similar things yourselves in the future. So we have the 3-bet and we have UTG calling, and we're going to click solve post flop with AI. And this is where we get to edit the range, and we can go to UTG out of position range and say, well, you know, all these hands in here, we're going to go deuces, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. All of these are going to be full frequency, and the same for suited connectors. And this is a big, big difference. Same for Queen Jack, same for Jack 10. And let's put Queen 10 suited and King 10 suited as 50% hands. And I think this is a much more realistic representation of what a decent amount of players that you play against are going to do. We'll even add in some more ace 4 and ace 5. Okay. So of course, once you know this, you can even edit your 3-betting range. And a nice thought experiment would be to say, oh, well, this is the 3-bet range. This has mixed hands. Are there hands that perform better or worse when my opponent is flatting all the pocket pairs and all the suited connectors? And the answer is, well, you know, jacks and 10s are probably going to do really well, and 9s is probably going to do really well. And maybe a hand like King Queen suited or Ace Jack suited, these hands that do really well against pairs and suited connectors. Whereas a hand like 4-5 suited, when your opponent's calling his 6s and his 7s and his 6-7, probably does worse. So you might want to kind of in a simplistic way say, oh well, my opponent's likely a calling station, so I'm going to remove the weaker parts of my range and increase the stronger parts of my range. And that's a fairly straightforward pre-flop adjustment. Now we're going to look at a few boards and just examine the differences so that we have it in our head. That I think 1 or 2 boards should probably do. So we're going to start with A7 deuce rainbow. I'm going to bring up this range and the normal range side by side. So this would be the normal range, and the normal range has 100% C-bet, and the EV for in position is 12.16. The equity is 58, and after the C-bet we get this reaction of 15% check raise, 45% fold, which is a big overfold, right? Because we picked a board that's very good for the in-position player, because a lot of the hands that flat the 3-bet are kind of speculative hands like the suited connectors and the pairs, and they don't really improve very much. This is a good board for the 3-better. So out of position has to overfold on the flop to make up for that. There is no point carrying your weaker range another street to a bigger pot, so you overfold immediately. Now, how's this going to change when we add to the out-of-position player more 8-7, 7-6, more 7s, more deuces on the one hand, but also more 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s. And keep in mind these numbers. The EV for in position is 16. Well, we want to go before the bet. The EV is 12.16, and the equity is 58%. So now same sim, but in this case we have this full frequency of suited connectors and pocket pairs, and despite hitting more sets, the EV for in position grew to 12.2, and the equity grew a lot to 61.5. So what's going on here? And this is a bit strange, but it cuts to a really important core aspect of poker, is that, well, sure, we added 7s and deuces, but we also added 6s, 5s, 4s, and 3s. So overall, the range got weaker, and in position gains equity. But equity is not created equal, and the equity of 7s and deuces is so amazing that despite this big equity shift, in position gains EV, but not millions and millions of EV points, because what's going to happen is that when we check and he bets, yes, we're going to fold more. Remember, this was folding 45% before, but we're also going to raise more because we have more of the polar region. So this is now raising 21.5% versus 15, which is almost a 50% frequency increase in check raising. In this specific example, and then I'm going to show you guys another one, we can see that adding these pairs and suited connectors, on the one hand, we hit this flop less and we have to fold more. On the other hand, we hit sets more, and so we get to bluff raise more and we get to be more aggressive. And both of those things are important to keep in mind. So these kind of players who are flatting all these hands, they're going to overfold to the c-bet more, or at least they should. Maybe they'll choose to call you with 6s. But at the same time, they're going to hit more, and so you're going to face more counter-aggression. You guys might say, okay, Uri, well, that's well and good on A7 deuce. You picked the worst board for this range. So let's pick a board that's much nicer. So here we have Queen 6-7 two-tone. And here, 6s and 7s and 6-7 suited and 8-9 suited and 4-5 suited. And all those extra hands that we added are actually hitting a lot more. So what happens now? Well, in the normal, this is the normal ranges where we see these hands are more mixed. Equity for in position is 52, and the EV is 9.95. And again, remember these numbers, 51.9 and 9.95. We're going to compare these. And the strategy when you check is that in position bets very often, but not always, with a fairly big size. The reaction of out of position is actually to check raise this a lot. The big size puts you into this kind of situation and where you're not very incentivized. You don't have many hands that can actually call, and so a lot of your reaction kind of becomes raise or fold. And this is these raises are kind of protection raises with 9s. It's not exactly a bluff or value. It's this tiny raise where you're just raising to deny some equity from overcards, and then you're going to have to play the hand later. This is a dynamic here with 80% c-bet, remember 9.95 and 51.9. Now we're going to go and look at what happens with the more dense range that's going to hit here more. And try to pause the video and guess, is who's going to have more equity, who's going to have more EV. Okay, so we're within your range, and surprisingly enough, even though we picked a board that kind of smashes this range, EV for in position increased from 9.95 to 10.24, so almost a third of a big blind, and his equity increased. So what's going on? And here I'll bring you guys back to the same concept as before, and it applies here where we're saying, sure, 6s and 7s and 6-7 suited, those are great, but what about 5s and 4s and 3s and deuces and ace-4 and, jack 10 and 10-9 and 7-8, which is a nice hand, but not very strong. So kind of, we added this top range, but we also added a very weak range. And this is kind of what happens when you throw in suited connectors and pocket pairs into a range, and maybe this can lead to a bit of an understanding of why there's a limit to how many of them you want, because these hands have a polarized reaction to a flop. They either hit something very strong or they hit something very marginal, and they don't often hit in between hands. So how does in position react here? And the answer is here, he actually bets more often with a smaller size, because the out of position player has more strong hands, so we're less incentivized to build a pot. But he also has more weak hands, so we're actually less incentivized to kind of prod at the pot. And this is going to be, I think, kind of a general thing where when you change the structure of your range to be, I hit more good hands, but also I miss more, these small bets are going to be more appropriate. And when you remove these pocket pairs and make the range more, a range that hits top pairs and middle pairs and has high cards, you're probably going to get more big bets and more focus on a polarized region. And of course, once the small bet hits, there is not as much raising of the crazy kind as we saw before, which also isn't something that really happens in practice. Almost no one plays like that. But yeah, we have 6s and 7s and 6-7, so there's a lot of raising. And we have these hands, deuces, 3s, 4s, 5s. So there's also a lot of folding and probably a slight overfold to this quarter pot bet, even though we hit the board quite nicely. Okay, let's finish off with the most extreme board we can think of for this kind of range. And I'm actually going to change this, and we're going to go 5, 6, 7, two-tone. And, as good of a board as you can think of for the suited connector pocket pair range. And here what we see is that with the normal ranges, this board gets donk bet 25% of the time. And EV for in position, of course, he's at a disadvantage now. I mean, this is as bad as it gets. You could make this monotone, maybe. I'm not even sure that's the worst, because all your ace-kings would now have a flush draw. So EV 7.9, equity 46.5. And, with a disadvantage in equity, we see out of position actually taking the betting lead. So yes, when we try hard enough, we can make a board that's better for this range than the other range. EV for in position drops a whole lot, 6.31. That's 1.5 big blinds drop. Equity drops by 2%. Out of position can now lead everything. And this is maybe kind of another difference that you might think of, is that for this range, 7-6-5 and 6-5-4 and 5-4-3, it doesn't matter how low the board gets, you still smash it. Whereas the previous range, the game theory range, because it has the low pairs and the low suited connectors less often, it doesn't smash every board just as equally. So 6-5-4 and 8-7-6 are not going to be hit to the same extent by that range. Whereas this range is more symmetrically smashing all of these types of boards. So also something to consider. Okay guys, we're going to wrap up with that. I hope this was useful for you guys. You can use this exercise and play around with ranges, and I think it's very useful to see the difference and actually be looking at a realistic representation of strategy and ranges when you practice. There is no reason to do things with imaginary ranges when you're playing against real opponents, and these programs can let you put in the ranges, put in the c-betting strategies. There's a lot of flexibility, and once you kind of see the principles and the range interactions, you can hopefully take it from there and generalize to your play at the tables. Hope you guys enjoy this one, and until next time.